Alright, so I have already written the method definition for this problem. And so if you remember in our whiteboard analysis or problem analysis just now, we have to have two cursors. So these two cursors will be, so let's call them C1, which will be at index 0, and then another cursor C2, which will be at the last index. So we call it array. So array that length -1. Okay, don't forget that -1 because otherwise it will be array index out of bounds. So as what we have mentioned earlier, as long as C1 and C2 are not pointing in the same element, then we can still continue looking for the pair. So that's why C1 should be less than C2. All right. And then let's take their sum. So if sum, it should be in array C1 plus array C2 if sum is greater than the target. If you can remember, we have to decrease the position of our C2 because we need a lower value. So C2 minus minus. Else if sum is less than the target, then we have to move our left cursor to the right, C1 plus plus. And finally, else, so let me just move this down. So else, then we already found a pair, then return new int, and then the values will be the positions of C1 and C2, C1 and C2. And then finally, that's the end of the loop. If we have reached the end of the loop and we haven't found anything, our return will be the default of empty array. Return new int, empty array. Alright, so now let's start coding this in LeetCode. So if you can remember, we need to have two cursors that is at index 0 and another cursor at the very last index of our array. So numbers that length -1. And then we need to loop to our array. So we will have our cursor 1 has to be less than C2 or cursor 2 before we end the loop. Once they meet, it already means that we haven't found any we won't find any solution to this problem. Okay. So while C1 is less than C2, and then we need now to compute for the sum. So the sum will be equal to where the cursors are pointing. So numbers C1 plus numbers C2. And then we need to evaluate the sum. If sum is greater than the target, then we need to decrease the value of C2 because our sum is already more than the target, meaning that we need a lower value. So decreasing the right cursor means that we are lowering the value of our sum as well. Else if our sum is less than the target. So if it's less than the target, we need a larger sum, so we need to increase C1, so C1 plus plus. Else, we already found the solution. So if it's not less than, it's not greater than, then we already have the solution. So C1 and C2, all right? And then here we need to add our default solution, so return new int and empty array. So the only difference for this LeetCode problem and in our original problem in our website is that this, as you can see, your returned answers, both index 1 and index 2, are not zero-based, meaning that it starts at index 1. So in that case, we need to add C1 plus 1 here. So we need to increment it by 1, similarly for our cursor 2. So basically that's it. Let's run this code and then see the results. Oops. Yes, so it has to be C2 plus 1. That's 2. Right. Sorry about that. Okay, so as you can see, it's running. Then let's submit this one. And there you have it. So if you like this video and if you want more, make sure to like and subscribe. And see you again next time. Alright, goodbye.